And we're going to get started. It looks like our waiting room is empty right now, so that's great. So welcome everybody to the Inclusion Collaborative today. And this presentation was actually going to be recorded. I've been through it once without you all, but because of the fires, the pixels were really poor, and so we're redoing it today. And I have to say, I'm really happy to be here with you. As you know, it's very difficult to make connections with other humans right now. And especially in our profession, there's a lot of pressure for all of us to do what we can for our kids, right? And so I'm happy to have you here. I will try to make this a little more interactive than I had originally planned. There's no reason with our smaller group that we can't have a little, sorry, I'm letting people in. I actually can't let people in from the waiting room and talk at the same time. I found it's a skill I do not have. So one thing that we're practicing as we came in today was a best practice as a teacher. And whether you're a teacher or you're an administrator, you're struggling with distance learning. And one good practice is if you have some of your kids behind cameras for whatever reason, asking them to do something like answer in a chat or give you a reaction is a really good way to just make sure they're there with you as you're going ahead and participating in your lesson. So we just used a little bit of best practices this morning as we get going. I'm Dr. Paulette Cobb. I am actually the Director of Special Education here at San Benito High School. I've been here for 7 years now. I have my doctorate and my focus was on inclusive education and specifically focusing on co-teaching, which has been something that I've worked on since I've arrived here at our school district. So one thing that I really feel strongly about is helping other directors, helping teachers, and really reaching out around the state and trying to support other districts as they prepare to have more inclusive practices in their lives. So if you look at my presentation that we have there, you see merging waters. And I use water as sort of an analogy throughout my presentation because I really want you to think about, in this case, inclusion and merging waters, right? Different types of students that come together to make one body of water, or different types of students that come together to make one school complete. And the school's not complete if they're not all together. So our jobs as special educators is to ensure that that happens, whether you're a preschool kindergarten teacher or if you're a high school teacher. Now is the time to start including at a higher level. And so we'll talk a lot about today, what does that mean to you? Because it's gonna be very different. You know, it might be very different for somebody who, like Angela, who's a kindergarten pre-K, to somebody that's in the high school level, right? So you might be thinking about Maria, who's 9 through 12. So although you have different perspectives, our goals are the same. What's different is the situation that we're given, right? What district are we in? What are we doing for our job? So throughout my presentation today, what I'd like you to do is I want you to focus on your job. Sorry, I have to let people in. I won't always apologize, but I just don't want you to know why my brain is bifurcated right now. I want you to think about your situation, not mine and not your friends. Think about your own situation and how are we going to do a better job? Because that's really our call in this world. So where are we going today and what is our presentation about? It's about why we improve our practices. So as I started in on my dissertation, as I started working and studying and figuring out how to include our students, the one thing that resonates with all educators is that we are actually required. And so we all enjoy our requirements and our boundaries and the things that, that lead us. We are required to include students at the highest level possible. IDEA is not a new legislative rule. It has been around for many, many years, since the 70s. But where are we in the process? And if we really, really reflect on what we're doing for our learners, all learners, do we have our kids included at the highest level possible? And we're gonna do some reflection today. We're gonna do some reflection. I'm going to actually give you a reflection tool that you can use. I believe that it's already been shared through the Inclusion Collaborative. It's a survey that I will help you to kind of take a look at your school district and what is your situation. So this is something I always want you to keep in mind. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. Remember, I am telling you that we're all at different places right now and we all have a job ahead of us. And so there is no person here that doesn't have that. Sorry, I'm going to try to keep an eye on my chat as I'm working on this. So as you look at my picture there, you see different kinds of fish, right? All these different kinds of fish have different needs, just like our students and just like us as educators. I want you to consider your district history. I want you to think about your boards. I want you to think about, if you're a director, the directors before you. If you're a teacher, the teachers before you. I want you to think about where you are and what is your reality right now. Some boards, some principals, some people are very, very supportive of inclusion and special education. I find at our district, we have this fantastic human named Cassandra Guerrero, who just jumped in on our talk, who started an inclusive movement years ago. And it is now part of the fabric of our school, but that's not true at every school district. So again, thinking about where you are and what do you have to accomplish. So there's a lot of research, and I show you this picture because, like the boats in the harbor, research is going to tell you a lot of different things. So you can go out there and find research that supports all kinds of different points of view, and sometimes it can be a little confusing. But the current reality in schools is that the percentage of students that are integrated, 40% of the students are included at the level they should be. So that leaves 60% of our kids where we can do a better job. That might be a mild to moderate student. It could be a moderate to severe student. We also find that students perform better when they are included with general education peers if they have an IEP. The reason being, and the reason for the name of my presentation, the race to the top, is that our students will race to the top if they're given a bar to rise to. If we give them a really low bar, they're going to rise to that bar, right? So we want to give them the race to the top. And most importantly, and this is a question that will come from your general educators, if you're not a general educator, is how does this impact our other students in our classroom? And research is showing us that even the students in the classroom, the general education classroom, do better as they are included in a co-teaching situation. And in a classroom where there isn't a co-teaching situation, kids will do equally good or better when they're using universal design for learning, when they have a co-teacher in the classroom, when you have that extra support. And there are some studies that show that some students don't do as well. And that would be a reflection that we would have to make as far as what are we doing to provide our teachers with best practices and support the inclusive practices at your school district. So you want to use evidence-based practices, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So evidence-based practices, as you guys know, are all those practices where there's been a lot of research done and they've shown great outcomes. And so we're going to focus on one study right now, which is from the University of Massachusetts. And they studied all the schools in an urban public area. And that was all different levels, right? So our elementary guys out there and our high school guys out there, this was everyone, general education and special education. And they whittled it down, whittled it down, whittled it down to find the schools where both the gen ed and the SPED students were performing better. And what they found is that there was 11 practices that were central to all those schools. And we're going to share those with you. And that's what the survey's about that I'm going to provide you for. Sorry, I'm looking at my chat. Okay. So what can be influenced within your schools? What can be influenced within our schools? Our instructional setting can be influenced, how we're providing our education to our kids. Collaboration, instructional practices, in-class support, relationships, and effective use of resources. So these 6 areas are really sub-areas that we want to focus on as administrators and teachers and improvement. And, you know, like I said, what is happening maybe at Wendy's school and what might be happening at Erica's school can be very different. So their districts might have different points of view and different practices. So today we're going to try to look and see what are some of those areas that we need to work on. But I do want you to remember that together you're an ocean. And what that means is that you need to look at these practices with your site administrators. You need to look at them with your, school district so that together you're making these improvements. We didn't have as much improvement until we started having our site administrators, our principals, really believing in inclusion and really feeling like that is part of what we are going to do. I'm going to pause just for a second here before I start going into these different, because we're going to have an activity. And I see that a lot of your cameras are on, and I'm thinking there's probably a reason we don't have cameras on, sorry, which is fine. Because usually I will do a fist to 5 right here. So I'm gonna, first of all, I'm gonna pause and see if there's any questions. Hi, everybody. You don't have to turn on your cameras, but if you want to, you can do the fist to 5, and otherwise you're gonna do it quietly. No questions? I'll give a little wait time.
So is the video going to be available later? I see your
Yes,
recording.
it will. Thank you, Andrea. Okay, so here we go. We're gonna do a little fist to 5 activity, and you can do it by yourself in your room. You can start counting. Sorry, I have somebody in my waiting room here. You can start counting in your room, but in this case, it's gonna be a fist to 6 because there's 6 different areas, right? And I'm gonna read them. And as I read them, you're gonna put a finger down if you have that in your school district. If you're like, yeah, that's something we do, right? So let's start with the first one, just for example. A pervasive emphasis on curriculum alignment with state standards. Effective systems to support curriculum alignment. Emphasis on inclusion and access to the curriculum. Culture and practices that support high standard and student achievement. Well-disciplined academic and social environment. And the use of student assessment data to inform decision-making. Great, so you guys are gonna be in different places, right? So I see a 3, I have a 1 sticking up here, I've got a 2 out there, and you can put your number in the chat if you'd like to, so we can kind of get an idea of how you're doing, and if you don't, that's okay too. But I wanna give you an example. So when I first started on this journey, we had some low expectations for what I would call the middle group. That's our SDC kids, the kids that are sort of academic, right? They can do some basic math and English and such. They're not severely handicapped, and they're not RSP students, so we're having trouble trying to get them to fit into our system. And so we made it okay not to give them a rigorous curriculum that was as rigorous as everybody else. And it wasn't fair, right? So we had to do some work on that, and it took years, honestly. We're still always evolving. Remember, we all have things to work on. So 2 years ago, I might not have been able to put my finger down for that one, and that's okay. But what I want you all to think about is you look at this list of 6 things, and this is 6 out of the 11 effective practices that they found make the school for all kids better, gen ed and sped. As you look at these practices, I want you to think about your own situation, your own power that you have within your situation to make a change, and what does that look like for you? For me, it looked like looking at the curriculum and making sure, for example, that my science teacher that was teaching basic science to our kids was teaching environmental science, biology, and chemistry to our children, and that he understood that curriculum, that he had the access to the PLC. And something that was really big and a kind of a duh moment is having the curriculum development days to actually put things together like our gen ed teachers do. So how do we support our kids? I had to make that change. You might have a different situation. Oh, next one. Oh, there we go. Okay. This one we get a true fist to 5 because there's only 5 of them. So I want you to think about, and it doesn't hurt, you know, if you have paper or you have somewhere you want to jot down like some of the ideas that might come to mind as we talk. So we're gonna go ahead and put our 5 up, or in your head, you can do your 5, it's okay. Unified practice supported by targeted professional development. Are we teaching our teachers what they need to do? Access to resources to support key initiatives. Effective staff member recruitment, retention, and deployment. Interesting. Flexible leaders and staff that work effectively in a dynamic environment, and effective leadership. And it's okay, there's no shame in your fist to 5, by the way, it's okay. So thank you, Maria, for participating. Thank you guys, and thank you, Rhonda. Thank you for putting it inside your head. Cassandra, I saw you working on it. I'm gonna share again something that you should know. So we look at effective staff member recruitment, retention, and deployment. And that's something as a director, you go, how much do I have control over this when it's so hard to find a special educator, especially in high school, right? If you're a high school person, I don't know about preschool, I have to say as far as recruitment and retention, but in high school, a lot of times you need subject matter and you need a teacher. And so for us, what used to happen is our special ed department was the conduit for people who wanted to coach, right? If you wanted to be a football coach, a basketball coach, a volleyball coach, you could become a special educator. When something opened somewhere else, you could slide on over there and you'd leave special education. So every year we would have this turnover. When I first got here, it was like 3 or 4 teachers. This year, we only had 1 new teacher, and that's because we added a class. And so even though I don't have a ton of influence on that, because we do have some unknowns and things we can't control, we kind of changed that practice a little bit. Like we looked a little harder. I made sure I went on recruitment with the people that were recruiting. I made sure that I told people I was unhappy with my folks being poached out of my department when I had somebody that was doing a great job and I'm spending the time to teach them. And when it comes to co-teaching, because co-teaching is sort of my, my gig, when it came to co-teaching, if I spent that time to teach someone to be a great co-teacher, I didn't want you to take them away because they are now a partner to somebody else in our general education population. So it was really important that we had some consistency. Now, any of these could be your area where you want to work on. I just want you to understand that sometimes we don't have a ton of influence, but the little things we do make a big difference in an inclusive environment. Do we have any questions right now? Good. All right, it's okay if you don't. All right, I'm going to see what I can do to make a very smooth transition here, you guys. There it is. Can you see my survey? Give me a thumbs up if you can. Thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you, guys. So this is an effective practices survey. It takes all those ideas that we just talked about, and they should be available through, Myra has helped me get some things downloaded, so you should all have access to this. And so this form is to help give the district a better idea of the strengths and the area of need for effective practices. So as you go through, you could take this, and of course you could modify it to your own needs. But if you want to take a look and see, like, who are we asking these questions to? What grades? For me, I'm a high school director, but this works for all of your different levels, of course. How long have you been teaching? So you do find different answers from people. You kind of get a little trend. And then the questions we'll ask. Remember, we asked about curriculum, and I talked a little bit about curriculum. It gives you some ideas about what people think about the curriculum. Do they think that the kids with mild to moderate disabilities get the same curriculum, right? So when I have a co-teaching situation, I know that's the fact. 100% those kids are in gen ed. Are they aligned to state standards? Are they available to all students and modified as needed, right? This was my area I had to work on. And you guys will have access to this too. And what you'll find is when you start answering these, all of a sudden you start seeing a trend. And so you want to give this to a lot of different people. Maybe you start with your administrative team or your SPED team, but you might want to take a peek and see, what does a general educator think? Because sometimes what you find is that what you think and what the general education team thinks is different, right? Because you think, oh, we're doing so great. We've got all these things going on. And the general education folks are like, hey, we haven't had the professional development we need. You're focusing on this other group, right? So this gives them a chance to give you a little bit of information. Thank you so much, Myra, for putting that up there for us. Effective practices survey. So here we're looking at key initiatives. Remember, there was something that we asked about key initiatives. Are they clearly defined? What is your district doing, right? So co-teaching for us, I feel, is fairly clearly defined. We have trainings and people are, prepared when they do it. Does everyone understand it? That's a good question. I'm not sure. Are they supported with the training? You have to make time for folks to be good at inclusion. And are you supported with the school resources like materials and time? Remember, I told you that the duh moment was I didn't give the curriculum development day at the same rate as I gave it to other teachers. And then, it's interesting to find out what people think the key initiatives are at the school, right? And if you're in a bigger district, you might have multiple schools. For me, I'm a single school district, so it's very easy for me to kind of identify, but you do get different answers. And then school practices. Do we support high standards for all students? And what does that mean, right? What is a high standard for all students? Support student academic achievement, focuses on teaching and learning, and utilize student assessment data to inform decision-making. I think we have a lot of work to do in this area right here for me, right? But remember, we're all different. And then our school is positive for students. So this is really about culture, right? Provides access to all students, has collaborative group seating in the classroom, is inclusive for all students. So an example for me would be that we have co-teaching classes. We also have a really big inclusion program that I talked about earlier with Ms. Guerrero, and our students need to be included in all those different things. So when I go into a co-teaching class, for example, I don't want to see all my SPED students in one area and the gen ed students in another area, and then my teachers separated. I want them working together, so you don't know who the gen ed teacher is or the SPED teacher is, and I don't want to know who the SPED kids are in the classroom. Because what I found through my studies is that when you ask a teacher how your SPED kids are doing, although they may not be performing at the level of the highest gen ed student, they are performing at the same level as you might find an EL student or another student that might be struggling for different reasons. So these practices help all kids. I want to also remind you, so think about it this way: if you're a parent and you have a student and there's 2 teachers in the classroom instead of 1, and those teachers are making time and able to get to all students and answer questions, every student needs that, whether you have a high level student who needs to be stretched a little and given the attention they need to do that, or whether you have a student that needs scaffolding and you need somebody to do that. And then questions about our teachers, right? Are they effectively recruited? Are they satisfied with their school site? Are they happy with their position, right? Assigned to the grade level and subject matter that match their skills, that's very important. Do they collaborate with their colleagues, and do they collaborate with students and with leadership to let us know what they need? So these are some really good things to think about when you look at your staff. And then this is a really interesting question. How would you describe the teachers at your school, to see what is that short answer that those folks will give you? And you can see when you have multiple types. So for me, I have a lot of teachers. We have over 120 teachers on our campus because it's a very big school. And so when I start getting answers, I can start parsing it out by what does the social science group believe versus the math group, versus, for an elementary school, is first grade have a different perspective than fifth grade? And you might find like, aha, if I focus on first grade and inclusion and getting them moving because they've got a lot of pieces in place, I can then get them going and then go focus on fifth grade where they seem to be having a lot of problems. And then leaders at my school. And this is where we as leaders have a really big responsibility. How do we have an open mind, be flexible, but more importantly, how do we help our colleagues find the time to open their mind and get out of, like right now, what are we focused on? We're focused on our kids and remote learning and a whole new learning environment. How do we help them with an open mind, flexibility, collaborating with our teachers, collaborating with our families, building positive relationships with staff, and implementing changes that support academic growth for all? Now remember, these are evidence-based practices, you guys. So even though they seem like sometimes it's like, well, duh, these are the things that they found through that study that make all kids do better, right? So how many of these can we capture? And how many of these can we influence? Okay, and that's our survey. So you guys have a copy, it's in the chat over there, so you guys can you folks can actually access that, which is great. And then I'm going to switch back to our presentation. Is there any questions about that survey? If we were sitting in the room together, I would have had you take it. I would have given you a paper copy so that you could have kind of gone through it and talked about it. But is there anything anyone wants to talk about or any questions you have regarding these different areas? Okay. So, oops, sorry. Kirsten King's here. Let's let her in. There she is. Okay. So one of the things that I want to make sure that you get when you walk away from here is I want you to know that in this process, you're not alone. It's hard to help become a more inclusive school and to make changes in a school by yourself, right? So you have to find the folks that help you. And these little pictures here that you have, you see the guys in the rafts over there, right? That's how it's going to feel sometimes, right? You're going to be going over the whitewater rapids and you're holding on as tight as you can. And I think most of education kind of feels like this right now. And then you might sometimes feel like you're on that jet ski up there, right? And everything's going great. And you're like, I just did an observation of a classroom and my kids are integrated and they're doing great and there's scaffolding and universal supports are in the classroom, and I'm just so excited. And then there's also going to be times where you realize you've really made a difference because of the small efforts that you've made, the evidence-based practices you put in place, regardless of what ones they are, right? It might be different for Victoria than it is for Rhonda, and that's okay. And this is what it feels like. It truly feels beautiful and fantastic, and you realize that you've made a difference. Families realize you've made a difference. Teachers realize you've made a difference. And you know, it's not about us, but it is sometimes when you're trying to keep your cup full enough to be a good leader in the situation. So I wanted to explain a little bit how we improved our inclusion. And again, this is not about me, but this is about you thinking about where you're starting from. So I just want to give you a concrete example of where we started from 6 years ago. So we had our kids, we had segregated RSP classrooms that tried their hardest. We had wonderful teachers to follow the same curriculum as our gen ed peers. But really, when we went in, we found that the kids were not, and we'll give you some examples of that in a minute. So a traditional classroom, as you see up here, has 18 students in it, right? So all the kids would come in, they'd have one teacher. Their core class, so we're talking about their English, their math, their social science, their science, those classes were not in a general education setting. They were having them in a separate setting as needed on their IEP. So what we found for our school that worked is that we wanted to do a co-teaching model. We found that that was effective. And so we have co-teachers. And so 12 out of these 18 kids would go into a co-taught class. That is the equivalent of a third of our class. So our classes are 36 typically in high school. And 1/3 of those kids would have an IEP in the area that they're attending. So if they have an IEP with a goal in English, they might be in an English 10 class with 2 teachers. And then 6 of the kids, because obviously we can't put them all into that co-taught class or it would no longer be a general education class, would go into general education classes where they don't have 2 teachers. But what they do have is they access what we created, you might call it essential studies, we call it academy. And it doesn't take a student out of a core class. So that is actually the only separate class that we have for RSP right now besides pre-algebra. And so the student will go to that class and that teacher will help them look at areas. They might review the goals they're working on. They might help them make up tests that they're missing. They may reach out to general education teachers. They might teach our kids how to reach out to general education teachers. So that academy class is a block that students have. And those are the kids primarily that are all in general education, and this is their service. These 12 kids, their service model is in a co-taught class, which is considered general education as well, by the way. So on their IEP, they have a general education class here, and if you're a special educator, I'm assuming most of you are, there is a place on your IEP that you click that says general education, even though it's a service model. And so that's a wonderful way to keep your kids in the core. And what we found is that our teachers get in there and they are such a better member of a PLC. They are such a big helper to so many people. Our kids are doing great. Whoop. So this is how we grew, right? So when I started the very first year, we had seven classes. Now what we did is we decided we couldn't do it all at once. Remember, you think about where you are. Some of you may have inclusive practices in place already for your mild to moderate students. That's great. We didn't really. And so what we decided is it was too much. We worked with our union and they were like, you know, Paulette, we're just not sure you've thought this all out yet. You know, this is crazy. What are you talking? This is wild. We're going to have to rediscuss our contract. And so we said, you know what we'll do is we're going to give it 1 year in a freshman cohort, and all of the freshman classes that are RSP are now going to be co-taught, and we'll add in the academy. And the next year we added sophomores. So that's why we had 11. And the next year we added the juniors. And then 1920, last year was our first full year of full rollout where all grade levels, freshmen to seniors, had a co-taught option. And our teachers, our gen ed teachers liked it so much that they started adding them. So now instead of just biology, we also have environmental science. And so we now have a co-taught PE class for our more severely handicapped students because they love the idea so much. They're like, let us try this. So all of a sudden people are seeing success. And remember how I talked about that jet ski going flying out? That's how it feels, because it's like, everybody's jumping on board. This works. I want a co-teacher. I want a partner. And so that's great. So that is what worked for us. You can see the number of co-taught classes that grew. but this is the most important graph you're going to see and the most important information you're going to get today. When you look at this, these are our resource students. So this number, the yellow right here, is our resource kids. There's 295 of them, but 626 kids that are in general education have a co-taught class. 626 kids that would have only had one teacher in that classroom now have two teachers. And think about the benefit for the high AP kids, the kids that need to be enriched, or think about the kids that need to be supported because they have an English language need, right? Two teachers, 628. So 921 more kids have the benefit of co-teaching in our school because we kept track of the cumulative effects of our inclusion program. When we started, we only had 241. So you can imagine how proud we are that we are able to reach so many students. And the benefits are both measurable and immeasurable, if you will. So I wanted to share a few examples of the outcome. And again, you know, your outcome for inclusion and what inclusion means to you is going to be different for everyone, but little changes make a big difference. You guys don't underestimate how important it is to take a step. So this is a teacher that works with us, and her young daughter, Kiki, is so amazing, and she allowed me to share this with you and others actually. So in 8th grade, Kiki was in all RSP classes, and when she was in 8th grade and she took her standardized test, she got a 2421. And then when she went to grade 11, she got a 2528. And her mom, although the numbers don't seem, you know, brutally huge, her mom is actually a TOSA for us, and she's a teaching coach, right? So she's been helping her all this time, trying to help her grow. And you all know, if you know this test, that the 11th grade test is incrementally harder than an 8th grade test as it grows with our kids. And she was tickled and thrilled because she's like, there's no way she would have had access to this curriculum if we hadn't put her in a co-teaching class and she had stayed in those RSP classes. Now, these are my favorite examples. Gonna do my very best to be super smooth here, you guys. Give me a thumbs up if you're done, either Maria or Amanda, that way I'll know. Okay, so even if you're not quite done, I think you get the idea and the essence of this. Thank you, Danielle, for your great reflection. Our presentation was named The Race to the Top because this teacher that provided this for me used to call it the race to the bottom. She was a co-teacher, not a co-teacher yet. She was an RSP English teacher, a great teacher, by the way. Fantastic. She did everything she could to teach to the curriculum, to make sure she hit the standards. She went to her PLC. Her husband was the AP English teacher in the same grade level. So she did everything right, but her classroom was horribly, horribly difficult to manage, and the kids were just not achieving. So then I want to share this. Let's see if I can cheat. Can you guys see a new letter? Yes, okay, great. I'm going to leave this here for a second because I really want you to read this. Okay. So while you finish this up, I want to tell you this is the same student 1 year later. And so that student had been in a separate RSP classroom as a junior, and he had been put in a co-teaching class as a senior. And the influence of multiple things. I'm not saying he couldn't have written something closer to this the year before, but if he could have, he wasn't motivated to do so. And the next year, because he had a higher bar, because he was in a different environment, perhaps his home environment had improved. There's a lot of different things that could have influenced the improvement in this student. But if part of that improvement was because we gave him the race to the top, good for us, right? Like, good. And if we were part of the problem why he was achieving so lowly before, lowly, is that a word? Bad for us, right? Shame on us. We need to find the way to stretch our kids so that they do the best they possibly can. And the way they're going to do that is by getting this access to their peers and scaffolding, scaffolding, scaffolding. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to try to do a new share. See if it'll work. It says new share, so I'm going to believe it. Nope. Okay. Sorry. I'm going to do it the hard way. Sorry, guys. Okay. We're back to our presentation, I think. All right, so then I'm going to share a little bit of input from kids. What do kids think about this, right? Is this something that's helpful? So we're talking about inclusion and particularly co-teaching. How much more helpful are your co-teaching classes than your non-co-teaching classes? And you can see that 4 was much more, 5 was much more, 4 was more, 3 was like neither more nor less. 2 was less, and 1 was like meh. So you can see the kids find that there's benefit. All students, now this is so incredibly important. Equity, of course, is a big deal everywhere, always, and that is what we do, and that's why we do what we do. But what I want to share with you right here are these 2 responses as we look at them. The top one says, all children are treated equitably in a co-taught class. And you see the purple is strongly agree, and the green is agree. So you can see that you have about 80% of the kids that said that is true. But when you look in a non-co-taught class, the strongly agree is only 20% and the agree is 37. So there's a considerable difference in the percentage of how kids think that they're treated in that class. That's a student perspective. And this was 104 different surveys that I did of both gen ed and sped students. These are some of the responses they had. It was an amazing experience for me. It was fun and funny at times. It was very helpful. That's a very helpful thing to do or get. I honestly felt like I was getting more help in co-taught class because I was getting 2 different opinions in my work, which helped me a lot and made my writing a lot better. Co-taught classes make learning interesting due to the fact that the teacher has a unique teaching style. In my opinion, it was an amazing experience. They're good at any class and any subject. They're always great, and I always do better in class. Thank you for all the work I did in class. They are really great. I love the teachers. They're really nice. So relationships. When you have 2 adults in the classroom, you're building better relationships. And I think that would be something that students are responding to. It's amazing to watch, even in a virtual environment, in breakout rooms, or even in a virtual environment when you have 2 teachers. So when one person is sort of adjusting because you have to do something, that other teacher is picking up the ball and running with it. So the relationship building is so much better. I want to remind you that there's going to be barriers if you're going to start something new, right? So that's what the DAM stands for there, right? Things are going to hold you back a little bit. You always should work with your union, and you should always talk to them about what you're doing and why. And the most important thing is that whatever you do, you look at evidence-based practices for our students with special needs. And that's already something for you to stand on. Sometimes it's hard to get past traditional thinking. If you have a district, remember I asked you to reflect back on your district and who they are and how they feel. Financially, yes, it costs us a little more because there are situations where we actually need an extra section, but it's not an extra teacher. It's really just one block. And can we do that for our kids when we really should be? Sometimes the partnerships didn't work in co-teaching, and that's just life. People are people. And you have to make that change because it's not good for kids to be in a dysfunctional relationship. But I actually went and I observed a virtual co-teacher partnership recently, and the co-teacher reflected back to me afterwards, and he said, you know why we're doing such a good job? Because the kids see that myself and my partner, and they're 2 men, we have this relationship back and forth, and it really is, you get in there and you're totally into their conversations and they bounce things off each other. And, you know, the kids see a functional relationship in the classroom, and the kids may never see a functional relationship anywhere else. Grading can be difficult, but you can work through it. IEP considerations, you will have to put, if you make a change, you might have to make a change on your IEPs. And I've only had one parent come to me that was a gen ed parent and said, my daughter won't be in that class because you're going to water down the curriculum, and I don't want her with those kids. And I'm like, whoa, well, if you're going to call them those kids, I don't want you with those kids either, because that's not the right attitude. So we made a change. So solutions, look, the water's flowing, because you will. You need to get your board to support you. It's important to communicate what your work is, your good work. I suggest you always have a plan in whatever you do, no matter how small, you guys. If there's just even like one little change you're making, if you're a preschool teacher, a kindergarten teacher, and you're thinking of ways to like integrate your students, make a plan. What's your first step? What's your second step? And what is the outcome you want? Get outside support when you need it. It doesn't hurt to have someone come and coach you. I help and coach other school districts all the time. I know Cassandra there, she's the severely handicapped expert in many, many ways. And so she helps other people. She always reaches out with her professional development. Having teacher buy-in, making sure your teachers trust you and they know you're going to give them the professional development you promised, and that you're going to support them and be there for them. For us, Academy class was a huge solution for kids because we couldn't get them all in co-taught classes, and nor could we afford to put them all in co-taught classes. School-wide initiatives, so everybody believes the same thing. You know, it's the old rowing the boat in the same direction analogy. It's super important. Or the water's flowing down the river in the same direction. Making sure your parents know what's going on, and then just being consistent, supporting whatever work that you put in place. So I want to leave you guys with these last two little slides again with the water, right? Excellent is the gradual result of always striving to do better. Where are you today? What are you going to do better for our special education population, or even our other populations that might need that support? I'm just going to use the word cohort. We're bringing our kids back to school. That's something we're all probably thinking about right now, right? So gradually striving to do better for our kids. So look at the fountain on the left, and remember, when you're having a hard day, good results feel like all the parts are moving together. That will happen. And poor results feel very intimidating, like you're about to go down the drain on the right there. But don't worry, you're going to be okay. Just don't go into it together. Always have strong partnerships. And the reality is, if any of you are out there that are surfers, body surfers, boogie boarders, right? Some waves are beautiful and fun and fantastic, and some of them, sometimes you can just get smashed, and that's okay, because you just get up and try again the next day. So be brave, get out there, make a better environment, do what you can for your kids, use your research, look closely at what it means to your school. This is a result of looking at that survey that you guys looked at with us, that we went through. I put a number to things, so I kind of quantitated it, but I could see that my instructional practice needed a little work, right? And what I thought and what our administrators thought was a little different in a lot of areas. So this study was about 3 years ago, where I looked back and said, what can we do a little bit better? Make sure you navigate, right? Don't stop reflecting, you guys. Reflect. What can I do better? And don't be afraid to say, you know what? This pathway, this river, this creek, whatever you're in, it's not going the way I want it to. It's too rough, it's too smooth, it's, you know, not inclusive enough, and change, and let people know you're changing. And be thoughtful, don't let your guard down, right? Making sure that you're keeping an eye out for things that might be a problem and staying in front of it before you have a problem. Use some of these analogies when you're thinking about bringing your cohorts back in the next couple of months, if you're part of those things that your district is undertaking right now, because those are hard things. If you have a new project you're working on and you want some support, my information is right here. You're welcome to reach out to me. Like I said, I enjoy helping. I want to make sure that other districts don't have to reinvent the wheel like I felt like I did 7 years ago. You know, so good luck with all of your inclusive practices. So do you have any questions? No? Okay. It's funny. I had a friend that did a symposium recently, and he's like, you know, the funny thing is nobody says anything. It's very quiet, which is okay.
I have a question.
Yes, Vanessa.
How many co-teachers? I realize you're a high school. How many co-teachers did you have, and were these all special education teachers?
Mhm. Well, it's a special education and a general education teacher. So for every class that you saw on that graph, we have a teacher. So right now we have, sometimes it's duplicated. Like I have somebody that teaches 2 algebra classes. So we have about 24, 25 partners right now. So 24, 25 special ed teachers. And then of course they all have a partner that's a gen ed teacher.
Got it.
Which includes the PE, which is super fantastic right now. It's one of my favorite things. Our severely handicapped kids have gen ed co-teachers, which is wonderful.
Okay. And your school is like how big?
We have 3,400 kids. So I serve 424 kids right now.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
In all areas, so mild to moderate, moderate to severe.
Okay, but all the push-in teachers are hold a special ed credential. You don't use like support staff.
No, you could if your model, if you in your model want to use something like that, you could. But just remember that a support staff or a classified employee cannot actually create curriculum. So you're doing a little bit of a disservice to your teacher in the sense that your gen ed teacher would have to do all the planning and then teach that classified employee how to do it. It's better than nothing, quite frankly, but what you don't want is just an aide that's floating around versus 2 teachers that are teaching and making relationships and supporting. So 2 teachers are ideal.
Got it. Thank you.
You're very welcome. There's a whole philosophy. Hang on, Maria, I see ya. There's a whole philosophy in co-teaching and different types of approaches, which is a whole nother training. I could go on and on for hours, but it's not rocket science. It just takes a little bit of time to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question. For the presentation, you focused on RSP students. I teach at PB, so I'm really close to Powder Valley High School. And so we're pushing more of our SDC mild moderate population out to Gen Ed. So we've seen some success, but I was wondering if you can kind of touch on your experience on more of the SDC mild moderate students.
Yes, and I think you're working with Dr. Denti, who helped us through the years, and he's wonderful. So our SDC group was actually the group that we felt had been, and like I said, we looked in, sorry, there's somebody we had looked and seen where our evaluated our different areas of need, and one of our big areas of need was in that very area. And so last year what we did is we took a group of kids and we put them into the science class, the SDC students. It was the first class that we actually took a large group and then put them into Gen Ed to support them with an SDC teacher versus an RSP teacher. So we had a little bit more of a moderate type experience, and he would have been their teacher anyway. And we felt like it was pretty successful, right? They're not still achieving at the same level as the Gen Ed peers. And then you also have to think about possibly having to modify a grade, which we really pained over for a really long time. That's the big difference, Maria, is that a SDC student may not be able to achieve the standards, but they could benefit from being in the class. They're getting educational benefit. So then you as a district have to decide, well, what do we do about that grade then? Because a gen ed teacher or even the school district may not be willing to say they can master these standards and give them a grade that's on level with the other kids, but they might be able to give a modified grade, right? And so the SPED teacher might give that grade. And then like an SDC class, it's not A through G qualified. Sorry for you guys that are preschoolers and don't care about A through G. It might be a little deep in the woods, but Maria gets it. So they're not A through G qualified, but they're still going to their diploma. And that's what matters, because in the real world, they need that diploma, not the cert of completion.
Paulette, can I talk a little bit to the electives too?
Yes, yes.
So, so our students also, are in electives, and one thing that was really helpful was that the school schedule embedded what was called a, now I can't remember what it's called. What was it called, Paulette? Like what? The time in the middle of the day.
Oh, we had an AFT, so we had academic focus.
Academic focus time, that's what it was. So we had, it was just last year was our first year, I think, piloting it. All the time is running together for me. And so they were in academic focus time where they could go to that shop class or cooking class or whatever elective it was that they were in that was general education and did not have a co-teacher, and get extra support there. And it was a 30-minute period in the middle of the day. And teachers, there's a whole system, and there's lots of different systems you can use, but we use a system called Plus Time. And so teachers could take attendance in there and could flag students that they needed to see and things like that. And also there was an instructional aid added to our FATE and shop classes. And it wasn't a special ed instructional aid, it was just an instructional aid for that program that was added because of some of the populations of students that were struggling in there and the teacher feeling like for safety and things, they couldn't get around to all of the kids.
So the creative solutions that you might need to put in place, again, thinking about like, what is your barrier, right? What is your barrier in preschool? What's your barrier in first grade? What's your barrier in fifth grade, junior high school and high school? Like, what is your barrier and what's a creative solution? So AFTs were really exciting for us because the whole school, remember we were talking about whole school initiatives, the entire school had an intervention block built in to the schedule before we went on hybrid and then remote learning. So we've learned to use that time for all students, which is great. I mean, if you think about like DeForest training and all the PLC work, that's what they ask, is that we have a bell-to-bell intervention for our kids that need support. And so that's a challenge. Again, what challenge are we going to tackle? That was one we were lucky to do. Great questions, you guys. Anything else? We have about 4 more minutes if anybody has any other questions. All right. You may copy the survey. Absolutely, please use it. Just make a copy for yourself. I didn't have a better way to share it. I tried to figure out how to give you your own links so you would have your own copies, but usually I'm used to showing up and being like, look what I have for you, and now you can create it in whatever format you want. So please feel free to use it. My hope in the world is that I help you become a better leader or teacher, or whatever the case may be. We do better for our students with special needs, or we do better for our students, period, amen. Like, all kids are all kids. So, I'm here to help. There's no question that I'm not willing to answer, or no support that I'm unwilling to give. So just reach out to me if you need some support in this. I just think it's a wonderful thing, and I think it's so important for our children. And if I can help in any way, I want to do that for you. Okay, I'm going to sign off now unless there's any other questions. All right, thank you all for being so wonderful, and keep up the good work. Start where you are.